Before we begin, tell me this. Have you ever laughed at someone, only to discover later that they were the best among us? The crowd thought it was funny. Millions of people thought it was funny. But by the time the truth came out, nobody was laughing anymore. The video began with bright afternoon sunlight spilling across the boardwalk of Seabrook, North Carolina. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and weathered wood. Gulls drifted above the harbor. Families wandered between ice cream stands and souvenir shops. It looked like the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. Then the camera tilted downward. A German shepherd stood alone near a public bench. He was large, sable-coated, with intelligent amber eyes and a calm posture that seemed almost human. His fur was clean but worn in places, and around his neck hung an old leather collar faded by years of sun and rain. He wasn't begging. He wasn't bothering anyone. He simply stood there, watching the crowds move past, as if he were waiting for someone who never arrived. Then Madison Walker stepped into the frame. 17 years old, blonde hair, expensive sneakers, a bright smile built for social media. She already had thousands of followers and spent most days chasing the next viral moment. To Madison, every stranger was content. Every situation was an opportunity. Every laugh was a victory. She pointed her phone toward the dog and grinned. "Guys, you have got to see this," she said. Within seconds, several friends gathered around her. Their laughter drifted across the boardwalk. One of them tossed a colorful beach towel over the shepherd's back. Another held up a cardboard sign covered in marker scribbles. Madison filmed everything. The dog never reacted. That only made them laugh harder. "Look at him," someone said. "He doesn't even know what's going on." But the shepherd knew. His ears twitched slightly. His eyes moved from face to face. Yet he remained perfectly still. No barking, no growling, no attempt to run away. Just quiet patience. Madison zoomed in on his face. "This is definitely going viral," she laughed. Around them, strangers began stopping to watch. Some smiled awkwardly. Others pulled out their own phones. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody asked why a harmless dog had become the center of a joke. The ocean wind lifted the corners of the cardboard sign. The shepherd lowered his head slightly. Not in fear, not in submission, more like disappointment, as if he had seen this side of humanity before. Madison uploaded the clip before the afternoon was over. By sunset, the video had 50,000 views. By midnight, it had crossed 1 million. The comments poured in faster than anyone could read them. People shared it, reacted to it, turned it into memes. Madison celebrated every new notification. Every like felt like proof that she mattered. Every share felt like success. What she didn't know was that somewhere hundreds of miles away, a retired Navy SEAL named Ethan Walker was preparing to come home. She didn't know that her father had not yet seen the video. And she certainly didn't know that among the millions watching that German shepherd's silent face, one man would recognize something no one else noticed. A detail so small it barely appeared on screen. A detail that would turn a joke into a reckoning and reveal a truth powerful enough to change all of their lives forever. The next morning arrived wrapped in a blanket of sea fog. The harbor was quieter than usual, and the early sunlight struggled to break through the pale gray sky hanging over Seabrook. Fishing boats rocked gently against their moorings while the smell of salt water drifted through the narrow streets. Madison Walker woke to a flood of notifications lighting up her phone screen. The numbers climbed faster than she had ever imagined. 2 million views. Then 3 million. Messages from strangers. Invitations from content creators. Hundreds of comments praising her sense of humor. She smiled as she scrolled through them from beneath her blankets. To her, it felt like success. The kind she had been chasing for years. Downstairs, the house remained quiet. Her father had not returned yet. Commander Ethan Walker had spent nearly 3 decades serving his country. Even after retirement, consulting work and veteran outreach programs often kept him traveling. Madison had grown accustomed to his absences. Their relationship was not broken, but it lived in the spaces between missed dinners, delayed phone calls, and promises to spend more time together someday. She tossed her phone onto the bed and headed into town later that afternoon. The attention felt intoxicating. People recognized her. Teenagers whispered as she passed. A few even asked for photographs. Every smile fed her confidence. Every compliment pushed away the small voice inside her that wondered whether she had gone too far. Near the center of town, she spotted the German shepherd again. The dog was lying beneath the shade of an old oak tree beside the public library. Children walked past him. Elderly couples passed by. The shepherd greeted nobody. He simply watched the world with those calm amber eyes. Madison stopped. Something about his stillness bothered her. Most animals reacted. Most barked or moved or demanded attention. This dog never seemed interested in proving anything. She raised her phone again. One of her friends laughed. "There is your celebrity partner." Madison grinned and walked closer. "Looks like he came back for another performance." Yet even as she spoke, the dog remained motionless. A gentle breeze stirred the fur around his neck. His faded leather collar shifted slightly. For a brief moment, Madison noticed something attached beneath it. A small metal tag hidden beneath the worn leather strap. The engraving had become nearly impossible to read. Before she could look closer, a voice interrupted. "That dog deserves respect." Madison turned. An older man stood nearby holding a grocery bag. His silver hair peeked from beneath a faded baseball cap. Deep lines crossed his weathered face, the kind earned through decades of hard work and difficult memories. He was staring directly at the shepherd. "You know him?" Madison asked. The man's eyes softened. "Not personally, but I have seen that look before." He nodded toward the dog. "That is not the look of a stray." Madison exchanged amused glances with her friends. "Well, he is famous now." The old man did not smile. Instead, something unexpected appeared in his eyes. Sadness. Genuine sadness. He looked at the shepherd for several long seconds before speaking again. Sometimes the ones people laugh at are carrying stories they could never understand. Then he quietly walked away. Madison watched him disappear into the crowd. For reasons she could not explain, his words lingered with her. Behind her, the shepherd slowly lifted his head. His gaze followed the old veteran until he vanished around the corner. Then the dog settled back down beneath the tree. Patient. Silent. Waiting. As though he knew something the rest of the town had not yet discovered. The following afternoon arrived warmer than the day before. The fog had burned away, leaving clear blue skies stretched above Seabrook Harbor. Sunlight danced across the water, turning the waves into sheets of silver. Visitors crowded the boardwalk. Children carried ice cream cones. Street musicians played soft country songs beneath colorful awnings. The entire town seemed alive. Madison Walker loved days like this. Crowds meant attention. Attention meant views. Views meant growth. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from followers who wanted more content featuring the now-famous German Shepherd. By lunchtime, she was already planning her next video. Near the marina, she found him again. The dog was resting beside a weathered wooden bench overlooking the water. A few tourists snapped photographs from a distance. Others simply admired him. There was something dignified about the shepherd that made people stop and stare. Madison noticed it too, although she would never admit it. His calmness felt almost unsettling. Most animals reacted to the world around them. This dog observed it, as if he were studying people instead of the other way around. Madison approached with two friends trailing behind her. "There he is," one of them said. "You're lucky, Charm." Madison smiled and pulled out her phone. The shepherd glanced toward her for a moment, then returned his gaze to the harbor. Not fear, not annoyance, just quiet indifference. She began recording. Around them, the sounds of laughter and conversation blended with the distant cry of seagulls overhead. The salty breeze carried the scent of fresh seafood from nearby restaurants. Everything felt ordinary. Then a sudden shout broke through the noise. A little boy near the marina had dropped a bright red toy sailboat into the water. The current carried it away from the dock faster than he could reach it. The child leaned forward anxiously, stretching his arm toward the drifting toy. His mother hurried toward him from several yards away. Before anyone could react, the German shepherd stood. His ears lifted, his attention locked onto the child. Without hesitation, he moved across the boardwalk. Calm, focused, purposeful. He gently positioned himself between the boy and the edge of the dock, nudging him backward with his shoulder. The child stumbled safely onto the planks just as his mother reached him. The entire moment lasted only seconds. Yet something about it felt extraordinary. The shepherd had acted before any person nearby understood what was happening. The mother wrapped her arms around her son and thanked the dog through tears of relief. Several bystanders applauded softly. Others exchanged surprised looks. Madison lowered her phone. For the first time since meeting the shepherd, she felt uncertain. The dog accepted none of the attention. He simply returned to his spot beside the bench and lay down again as though nothing unusual had happened. One elderly fisherman watching nearby shook his head slowly. "That is not normal behavior," he murmured. "That dog has training." Madison heard him, but said nothing. She glanced toward the faded collar around the shepherd's neck. The old metal tag hidden beneath it caught a flash of sunlight. For an instant, she considered walking closer and reading it. But a new notification appeared on her phone. Another 100,000 views. Another wave of comments. The moment passed. She turned away and followed her friends down the boardwalk. Behind her, the shepherd remained beneath the afternoon sun, watching the harbor with patient amber eyes. Across the country, a plane carrying Ethan Walker had just begun its descent toward North Carolina, and fate was quietly moving all of them toward a truth that could no longer stay hidden. By the time Ethan Walker stepped out of the airport in Wilmington, the sun was already sinking toward the horizon. The sky glowed orange and gold above the Carolina coast, and the evening air carried the familiar scent of salt water that he had missed during months away. He drove the final stretch to Seabrook with the windows partially lowered, letting the cool breeze drift through the truck. Home always sounded different after a long absence. The distant cry of gulls, the rustle of marsh grass, the steady rhythm of waves against the shore. Yet something felt unusual the moment he stopped for coffee at a small gas station outside town. Two teenagers standing near the entrance were laughing while staring at their phones. "That dog is everywhere," one of them said. Ethan barely paid attention until he heard the next words. "The girl who filmed him is from Seabrook." Curious, he glanced at the screen as he walked past. The video lasted only a few seconds, but something about the German shepherd caught his attention immediately. Not the situation. Not the comments. The dog. Ethan paused. Years of military service had trained him to notice details others missed. Posture, awareness, discipline. The shepherd displayed all three. The dog remained calm despite the crowd around him. His eyes constantly scanned his surroundings. His body language showed patience rather than fear. Ethan frowned. That was not ordinary behavior. Back in the truck, he drove the remaining miles home with the image lingering in his mind. When he finally pulled into the driveway, the porch light was already glowing. Madison rushed outside the moment she heard the engine. For a brief time, everything felt normal. Father and daughter embraced. They carried bags inside. They shared stories over dinner while the last traces of daylight disappeared beyond the harbor. Madison talked excitedly about school, friends, and the sudden popularity of her online videos. Ethan listened patiently. He always tried to make up for lost time when he came home. The evening passed comfortably until Madison proudly opened her social media page and handed him her phone. "Look at this one," she said. It completely exploded. Ethan smiled politely and pressed play. The familiar German shepherd appeared on the screen again. This time he watched more carefully. The room seemed to grow quieter with every passing second. Madison continued talking, unaware that her father had stopped listening. Ethan's eyes remained fixed on the dog, on the way he carried himself, on the alertness hidden behind his calm expression. Then he noticed the collar. It appeared only briefly when the camera shifted angles. A faded leather strap, worn by weather and time. Beneath it hung a small metal tag. Ethan leaned forward. His pulse slowed. Something deep inside him stirred. A memory. A feeling he had not experienced in years. He replayed the clip. Then again. The image blurred each time he tried to pause it. Madison laughed. "What are you doing?" Ethan did not answer immediately. Outside, wind rattled the porch chimes softly. Somewhere beyond the house, waves rolled against the shore. Finally he spoke. "Where did you find this dog?" Madison shrugged. "He is always around town." Ethan stared at the frozen frame on the screen. His expression had changed completely. Because for the first time, he was no longer looking at a viral video. He was looking at a mystery. Sleep did not come easily that night. Long after Madison had gone upstairs, Ethan remained alone at the kitchen table with the phone resting beside a cold cup of coffee. Outside, the town had settled into silence. The distant foghorn from the harbor echoed across the water every few minutes. The old grandfather clock in the hallway marked each passing hour. Yet Ethan barely noticed. His attention remained fixed on a single paused frame from the video. The German shepherd's collar. The metal tag beneath it. He enlarged the image again. The resolution blurred. He adjusted it once more. Still unclear. But the shape looked familiar. Too familiar. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Ethan finally stood and walked toward a storage room at the back of the house. Inside were boxes filled with photographs, uniforms, and memories collected across a lifetime of service. Dust floated through the beam of a single overhead light. He searched quietly until he found an old green military case tucked beneath a shelf. The hinges creaked as he opened it. Inside lay faded photographs, deployment patches, and several worn notebooks. Near the bottom rested a framed picture taken years earlier overseas. Ethan lifted it carefully. 5 men stood shoulder to shoulder beneath a bright desert sky. Beside them sat a young German shepherd with alert ears and intelligent amber eyes. Ethan stared at the photograph for a long moment. Time seemed to fold inward. He remembered early mornings before sunrise, long patrols beneath endless horizons, the sound of paws moving faithfully beside a team that trusted one another with their lives. Most of all, he remembered the dog, Ranger. Ethan lowered himself into a chair. The name alone carried years of memories. Ranger had never belonged to one person. He belonged to the team. Loyal, calm, unusually perceptive. Sometimes it felt as though the dog understood people better than people understood themselves. Ethan looked from the photograph to the frozen image on the phone. The similarities were impossible to ignore. The same intelligent eyes, the same dark sable markings along the shoulders. Even the slight notch in the left ear appeared identical. Yet logic told him it could not be true. Too many years had passed. Too many unknowns stood between then and now. Still, the feeling refused to leave him. The next morning arrived bright and clear. Before breakfast, Ethan drove into town. He followed no plan, only instinct. Seabrook Harbor was already busy when he arrived. Fishing boats unloaded their catches. Shop owners swept sidewalks. The smell of salt water mixed with fresh coffee drifting from nearby cafes. Then Ethan saw him. The German shepherd lay beneath the same oak tree beside the library. Peaceful, watchful, waiting. Ethan stopped several yards away. The dog slowly lifted his head. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, neither moved. Something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Or maybe only curiosity. Then the shepherd stood and took a few calm steps forward. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Because as sunlight touched the faded collar around the dog's neck, the small metal tag became visible at last. And engraved across its weathered surface were letters Ethan never expected to see again. The letters were worn by time, scratched by weather, and nearly erased by years of neglect. Yet Ethan recognized them instantly. Ranger. His breath caught in his throat. The harbor noise seemed to fade into the distance. The fishing boats, the conversations, the gulls overhead. Everything disappeared except the dog standing quietly before him. Ranger tilted his head slightly. His amber eyes remained fixed on Ethan's face. There was no excitement, no frantic movement. Only calm recognition, the kind shared between old friends who no longer need words. Ethan slowly crouched. His hands trembled in a way they had not for years. "It cannot be you," he whispered. The shepherd took another step forward. Then another. The old collar shifted against his neck as a gentle breeze moved through the oak branches overhead. Ethan reached out carefully. Ranger lowered his head and rested it against Ethan's hand. The touch unlocked memories that had slept for years. Suddenly, Ethan was no longer standing in Seabrook Harbor. He was remembering a distant deployment beneath endless desert skies. He remembered early mornings when Ranger would sit beside the team before sunrise, patiently waiting for instructions. He remembered how the dog always seemed to sense tension before anyone else. More than once, Ranger had redirected a patrol route or alerted the team to something unusual. The handlers used to joke that the shepherd had better instincts than half the men around him. But nobody truly laughed. Deep down, they all believed it. Ranger earned trust the old-fashioned way. Day after day, mission after mission, through dust storms and sleepless nights, through uncertainty and exhaustion. Ethan remembered one particular evening when heavy winds rolled across the horizon and visibility dropped almost to nothing. The team had been navigating difficult terrain when Ranger suddenly refused to move forward. No commands changed his mind. No encouragement persuaded him. He simply stood firm, calm, alert, certain. The team altered course because of him. Hours later, they learned information that confirmed the dog had likely prevented them from walking into serious danger. After that, nobody questioned Ranger's instincts again. Ethan closed his eyes. The memories felt so vivid that his chest ached. Then came the hardest memory of all, the mission where Ranger disappeared. A day filled with confusion, noise, and chaos. When the dust settled, the shepherd was gone. Search efforts continued for days. The team refused to give up. Ethan refused to give up. But eventually orders came. The deployment moved forward. Ranger remained missing. Years passed. Ethan carried the loss quietly. Not because Ranger was a military asset. Not because he was a working dog. Because he had been family. And now somehow, impossibly, that family stood before him again beneath an oak tree beside the sea. Ethan opened his eyes. Ranger remained perfectly still. The shepherd's muzzle carried more gray than before. His movements showed the weight of age. Yet the intelligence remained unchanged. The loyalty remained unchanged. A small crowd had begun gathering nearby, curious about the emotional reunion unfolding before them. Ethan barely noticed. His attention never left the dog. Then Ranger gently pressed closer and rested his head against Ethan's shoulder. And for the first time in many years, Commander Ethan Walker felt tears forming in his eyes. That evening, the house felt different. The coastal wind brushed softly against the windows, carrying the scent of salt and distant rain. Madison sat at the kitchen counter scrolling through comments while Ethan remained unusually quiet. Ranger rested near the back door, his head on his paws, his amber eyes half closed. More than once, Madison noticed her father looking toward the dog. Not casually, not the way someone looked at a pet. The look carried history, respect, gratitude. Finally, Ethan set down his coffee cup and spoke. "Madison, do you remember the videos you made?" She shrugged. "Of course. Everyone has seen them." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know." Something in his voice caused her to lower her phone. The room fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant cry of gulls outside. Ethan reached into an old canvas bag he had brought home from storage that morning. He removed a weathered photograph and placed it on the table. Madison leaned forward. The image showed several younger men standing beneath a bright sky. Beside them sat a German shepherd. Even through the faded colors, she recognized the dog immediately. Ranger. Her smile disappeared. Ethan gently touched the edge of the photograph. "This picture was taken 14 years ago." Madison stared at it. "That is him." Ethan nodded. "Yes." The answer seemed impossible. Ranger lifted his head but remained silent. Ethan looked toward the dog before continuing. "There are people who spend their entire lives hoping to meet a hero. I had the privilege of working beside one." Madison listened quietly. The confidence she usually carried was gone. Ethan told her stories she had never heard before. Stories about long deployments, difficult days, and a German shepherd who never sought praise. He described Ranger's patience, intelligence, and loyalty. He spoke about moments when the dog noticed things others overlooked. Moments that protected people. Moments that changed outcomes. He never exaggerated. He did not need to. The truth carried enough weight on its own. Madison slowly looked from the photograph to the dog lying near the door. Suddenly, the viral clips on her phone felt small. Embarrassing. Meaningless. Ethan reached into the canvas bag again and removed several letters tied together with a faded ribbon. These came from members of the team. Madison carefully opened the first envelope. The handwriting was uneven but sincere. The writer thanked Ranger for his loyalty. Another letter called him a guardian. A third described him as the bravest soul they had ever known. Madison read each page more slowly than the last. Her throat tightened. Every letter revealed another piece of the dog she never bothered to understand. Every sentence felt heavier than the one before it. Finally, she lowered the final page. Tears blurred her vision. "I did not know," she whispered. Ethan's expression softened. He was not angry. Somehow that made it worse. "I know you did not," he replied quietly. Madison looked toward Ranger. The shepherd had not moved. He was not avoiding her. He was not judging her. He was simply watching with the same calm eyes he had carried through every insult, every joke, and every moment she had used him for attention. And for the first time, Madison understood that the dog she had treated like a prop had spent years earning the respect of people she admired most. The realization settled over her heart like a storm cloud. Because some mistakes become painful only after we finally understand the truth. The next morning arrived beneath a sky washed clean by overnight rain. Sunlight spilled across Seabrook Harbor, turning puddles into mirrors of gold and blue. Madison had barely slept. The letters remained spread across her desk exactly where she had left them. Every page seemed to carry the same message. Respect was earned. Loyalty was sacred. Some heroes never spoke at all. She stared at her phone. The videos were still there. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. For days they had made her feel important. Now they felt like evidence of someone she no longer wanted to be. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Ethan had already left for a veterans breakfast at a local community center. Ranger rested on the back porch, watching the morning breeze move through the tall grass beyond the yard. Madison stepped outside carrying a small bowl of fresh water. The shepherd looked up as she approached. For a moment she hesitated. The weight of embarrassment settled heavily on her chest. She knelt slowly and placed the bowl beside him. Ranger lowered his nose to the water and drank calmly. No suspicion, no resentment, just quiet acceptance. Madison swallowed hard. "I am sorry," she whispered. The words sounded small compared to what she felt. Ranger finished drinking and looked at her with those familiar amber eyes. The same eyes that had watched her laugh. The same eyes that had watched strangers point cameras at him. The same eyes that had never shown anger in return. Tears gathered in the corners of Madison's eyes. "I should have known better." The shepherd remained still. A gentle wind stirred the gray fur around his muzzle. Somewhere nearby, a church bell rang through the town. The sound drifted across the neighborhood like a reminder that every day offered another chance to begin again. Madison sat beside him for a long time. No cameras, no audience, no followers, just silence. Eventually, she pulled out her phone one final time. Her finger hovered over the screen. Then she deleted the videos. One after another. Every clip disappeared. The view counts vanished. The comments vanished. The attention vanished. Yet instead of feeling loss, she felt relief. Later that afternoon, she walked through town with Ranger at her side. People recognized both of them immediately. Some stared. Others whispered. Madison felt heat rise in her face. But she kept walking. Near the harbor, she stopped beside the old oak tree where the shepherd had spent so many days alone. Taking a deep breath, she opened her social media account and posted something new. Not another joke. Not another attempt to impress strangers. She shared a photograph of Ranger resting peacefully beneath the tree. Then she wrote about what she had learned. About humility. About service. About judging others without knowing their story. She expected criticism. Instead, messages began arriving from veterans across the country. Some had known Ranger's team. Others simply understood what loyalty meant. As the afternoon sun drifted lower over the water, Madison read every message carefully. Beside her, Ranger rested in the grass, calm as ever. And for the first time since this story began, she realized that changing a reputation was easy. Changing a heart was the real miracle. 3 weeks later, the town gathered beneath a clear autumn sky at Seabrook Harbor. The air carried the scent of salt water and fresh pine from decorative wreaths hung along the boardwalk. Sunlight shimmered across the bay while small American flags fluttered gently in the breeze. Word had spread far beyond the town limits. Veterans had traveled from neighboring counties. Families filled the benches. Children sat cross-legged near the front of the gathering area. Yet the center of attention seemed completely unaware of it all. Ranger rested quietly beside Ethan Walker, his aging muzzle touched with silver, his amber eyes calm and observant. A simple ceremony had been organized by local veterans after hearing his story. Nothing extravagant, nothing grand, just gratitude, the kind that comes from the heart. Ethan stood before the crowd and looked down at the shepherd for a moment before speaking. His voice remained steady, but emotion lingered beneath every word. He spoke about loyalty, about courage, about the quiet strength that often goes unnoticed. He described a dog who never sought recognition and never asked for praise. A dog who simply did what was right because that was who he was. The crowd listened in silence. Some wiped away tears. Others nodded knowingly. Then Ethan stepped back and motioned for Madison to come forward. A few months earlier, the thought would have terrified her. Now she understood that some moments mattered more than fear. She walked to the front carrying a folded sheet of paper. Her hands trembled slightly. Ranger lifted his head and watched her approach. Madison looked out across the crowd before finally speaking. She did not offer excuses. She did not blame anyone else. She simply told the truth. She spoke about assumptions, about chasing attention, about failing to see the value of another soul. Most importantly, She spoke about what Ranger had taught her, not through words, but through patience, through dignity, through forgiveness. When she finished, the harbor remained silent for several seconds. Then applause rose slowly through the crowd. Not because she was perfect, because she had changed. Ethan stepped forward carrying a small commemorative medal prepared by the Veterans Association. It was not a military award. It carried no official rank or title, yet its meaning felt greater than any piece of metal. Ethan knelt beside Ranger and gently fastened it to the old collar. The shepherd sat quietly throughout the entire moment. No barking, no excitement, just the same humble presence he had carried his entire life. The crowd stood. Applause echoed across the water. Some people smiled through tears. Others simply watched in silence. As the ceremony ended, the sun drifted lower over the harbor, painting the waves with shades of gold and amber. Ranger slowly walked toward the edge of the boardwalk and looked out across the ocean. Ethan stood beside him. Madison joined them a moment later. Together they watched the horizon where sea met sky. For a long time, nobody spoke. They did not need to. Some stories do not end with revenge. They end with understanding. Some heroes do not wear uniforms. They carry fur, scars, and quiet hearts. And sometimes the greatest act of courage is not saving a life. Sometimes it is giving someone the chance to become better. As the evening light faded and the first stars appeared above the Carolina coast, Ranger rested beside the people who finally understood his worth. The harbor breeze moved gently through his fur, and for the first time in many years, he was no longer waiting to be remembered.